Welcome to the History Stories podcast.
Glad to be here.
Get ready, because today we're embarking on a historic road trip. We're exploring a truly electrifying mystery from the ancient world.
Electrifying is right.
It's sparked by some, well, pretty unassuming artifacts discovered near Baghdad. You know, we pick fascinating, wild stories straight from history, try to make it fun, entertaining.
And this one definitely fits the bill. Our journey today, using our history books and uncovered sources, centers on these really peculiar objects. Collectively, they're known as the Baghdad Battery.
Right, the Baghdad Battery.
We're going to delve into what they actually are, where they popped up, how they were found, which is a story in itself.
Oh, yeah.
And the incredible debate they kicked off among archaeologists, historians, pretty much everyone.
Okay, so buckle up, join us. We'll unpack the evidence, explore these, well, surprising possibilities, and ultimately try to figure out the most likely story behind these enigmatic jars. Sound good?
Let's do it.
Okay, so the discovery itself. These things surfaced when mid-20th century near Baghdad, Iraq.
Yep, around Kujut Rabu. That's pretty close to the ruins of Ctesiphon.
Which was a huge deal back then, right? Capital for the Parthian and Sasanian Empire.
Exactly. Big, important place. But, you know, even how they were found is a bit fuzzy.
Fuzzy how?
Well, some accounts say 1936, during railway construction. Imagine digging for a railway and finding that.
Huh. Yeah, unlikely.
Others say proper archaeological digs, same year, 1936. But then there's another twist.
Go on.
This German archaeologist, Wilhelm König, some think he found them later, like 1938, already sitting in the Baghdad Museum collection.
Oh, so he didn't even dig them up himself, possibly.
Possibly not. It just shows you, how messy historical records can sometimes be, trying to piece together these fragments.
And the reason they were digging there in the first place, you won't believe this.
What was it?
Filling in puddles to stop mosquitoes breeding.
Seriously, that's how it started. From puddles to ancient batteries.
Kind of ironic, isn't it? So enter Wilhelm König. He's key here. German archaeologist.
Right. And was he the director of the National Museum of Iraq? Or maybe the lab director? Sources differ a bit.
Yeah, it's a bit unclear. But his background is interesting, part art historian, part archaeologist.
Ah, that mix. That could definitely influence how you look at an object, right? An artistic eye sees the form. The archaeologist thinks about function.
And it seems König pretty quickly decided, these are batteries. A really strong conviction.
Which, probably colored how he interpreted everything else about them. So, okay, what do these things actually look like?
Okay, picture a small clay jar. Terracotta. Maybe, 5 inches tall? Narrow opening, pretty simple looking.
Just a basic jar.
On the outside, yeah. But inside, there's a copper cylinder, a bit shorter than the jar, maybe 3.8 inches long, an inch across.
And the bottom of this copper cylinder, it's sealed.
Seems to be soldered shut, yeah. That's a crucial detail.
Okay. Copper cylinder, sealed bottom. What else?
Then right in the middle of the copper, not touching it, there's an iron rod.
Just hang in there?
It's held in place by a stopper at the top, made of asphalt. You know, that black, sticky stuff.
Asphalt. Like ancient tar.
Exactly. So the asphalt seals the top and keeps the iron rod separate from the copper cylinder.
Clever. And I read there's corrosion on the metal parts.
Yes. That's another big clue. Lots of corrosion noted on both the iron and the copper.
Which definitely hints that some kind of liquid was inside them at some point, right? An electrolyte, maybe?
That's the million-dollar question. Was it an electrolyte for a battery or, something else that just caused corrosion over time, maybe related to storing something organic?
Good point. But the liquid seems pretty certain. And you mentioned something else. Flaky material.
Yeah, in some jars they found this flaky stuff. Looked a bit like decomposed papyrus.
Papyrus. Okay, so we got the jar, copper, iron, asphalt, corrosion, maybe papyrus bits. It paints a picture, but yeah.
Right.
What is the picture?
Exactly. So before we jump into the theories, let's set the scene, the historical context.
Right. We need to know when these things might have been made. We're talking either the Parthian Empire,
which was around 250 BC to 224 AD.
Or the Sasanian Empire that followed, from 224 AD up to about 650 AD. Both were major players. Iranian empires ruling Mesopotamia.
And these weren't primitive societies by any stretch. We're talking sophisticated cultures.
Absolutely. Intricate art, grand architecture. You can still see the ruins. Massive trade networks. This was a happening place.
For sure. So when we think about the Baghdad Battery, it's coming from this advanced context.
It is. And this is a big but Despite all that sophistication, we just don't find other evidence of, like, practical electrical devices from that time.
That's the kicker, isn't it? No ancient wires, no switches, no light bulbs, nothing.
Right. So if they had batteries, what were they doing with them? Why isn't there more archaeological evidence for how they use this electricity? That's a major hurdle for the battery theory.
It really is. Though it's worth mentioning, these Baghdad jars aren't totally unique in their basic form.
True. Similar clay vessels, some with internal bits, have turned up nearby.
Like where?
Well, they found 4 in Seleucia, dated to the Sasanian period, and another 6 near Ctesiphon.
And were they identical?
Not quite. Some had bronze cylinders instead of copper. And significantly, some of these other jars clearly contain decomposed organic fibers.
Ah, like that papyrus-like stuff.
Exactly. Which strongly suggests a more mundane use for jars like this, like storing scrolls.
So maybe the Baghdad battery was just a fancy scroll jar.
That's the leading alternative theory, yeah. It applies Occam's razor. The simplest explanation fits the parallel evidence. Find similar jars used for storage. Maybe these were too.
Okay. But let's get back to the juicy part. König's idea in 1938, he didn't think scroll jar, he thought.
Battery. He proposed these were actual galvanic cells. Ancient batteries.
Right. How did he figure they'd work?
Well, the theory is simple electrochemistry, really. You've got the iron rod, that's one electrode, the copper cylinder, that's the other.
2 different metals, check.
Put them in an acidic liquid, an electrolyte, maybe something like vinegar or wine, which could explain the corrosion.
Okay, got it.
The difference in electrochemical potential between the iron and copper makes electrons flow. Boom, you get a small electric current.
It's basically the principle of a simple battery, just using ancient materials.
Precisely. It relies on chemistry that wasn't formally understood until centuries later, but the principle holds. And König's first guess for its use.
Electroplating, that's what he thought.
Yeah, specifically plating gold onto silver objects, using this electricity to deposit a thin layer of gold.
Wow. That would imply some serious know-how back then. Craftsmanship, understanding electricity.
It really would. It suggests a level of technological sophistication we just don't usually associate with the Parthian or Sasanian periods. That's why it's so compelling, this idea of lost knowledge.
Okay, so it's a bold claim. Did anyone ever try to, test it, build one?
Oh, yeah. Lots of people have tried replicating them over the years.
Do they work?
They do. Replicas made following the design, filled with electrolytes like grape juice or vinegar, they produce a measurable voltage.
How much voltage?
Not a huge amount. Typically somewhere between half a volt and maybe up to 2 volts in some experiments.
Okay. So not exactly car battery level, but it is electricity.
It is. And some experiments took it further. They actually linked several replicas together.
To get more power.
Exactly. And they successfully electroplated thin layers of gold onto silver items.
No way. So it's actually possible.
It seems so. The principle works. Mythbusters did an episode on it, remember?
Oh, yeah. They got it to work too, didn't they? Plated a small coin or something.
They showed it was feasible. So the fact that you can build a working replica and it can be used for electroplating, that supports the possibility it was a power source.
But is like half a volt really practical for large-scale plating?
That's a very good question. Maybe not efficient by our standards, but perhaps enough for small decorative items. The main takeaway is that the electrical potential is there. The debate is really about whether that was its intended function and what else they might have used it for.
Right, because electroplating isn't the only theory floating around, is it? What about, like, magic or rituals?
That's another fascinating avenue. Think about it from the perspective of ancient beliefs. If you had a device that could give someone a little zap.
A little electric shock.
Yeah. To someone who doesn't understand electricity, that could seem miraculous. Divine, even.
So maybe priests use them in ceremonies, make a metal statue tingle or something.
Possibly. It could create a sense of awe or mystery or divine presence. It fits with how unexplained phenomena were often woven into religious practice.
That's a pretty cool idea. Makes you wonder. Any other uses proposed?
There's also the medicinal angle, electrotherapy.
Like using electricity for healing?
Yeah. We know the ancient Greeks and Romans used electric fish, like torpedo rays, for pain relief. They literally apply the fish to numb aches.
Wow, really? Okay.
So maybe the Baghdad battery was used for a similar purpose, delivering small currents for therapeutic reasons. Some researchers point to bronze and iron needles found near the site.
Needles? For what?
Possibly for a form of electroacupuncture. It's speculative, of course, but draws a parallel to known ancient practices.
Electroacupuncture. That's wild. But you said earlier the most accepted theory is much simpler.
Right. Despite the exciting possibilities, most archaeologists lean towards the simplest explanation: storage containers.
Back to the scroll jars idea.
Exactly. Remember those similar jars found nearby? The ones with definite traces of organic fibers inside.
Yeah, the ones from Seleucia and Ctesiphon?
The argument is that the Baghdad batteries were just like those, used for storing important documents, maybe secret scrolls.
And the bits inside, the copper and iron.
The iron rod could have been a core to wrap the papyrus or parchment around. The copper cylinder, maybe just part of the structure.
Yeah.
And the asphalt seal would be perfect for keeping moisture out, preserving the scroll.
Okay, I see. When you compare it directly to other finds used for storage, it does sound plausible. Less exciting maybe, but plausible.
It's often the case in archaeology. The mundane explanation fits the available evidence better than the spectacular one. But still, the battery theory persists because it looks so much like one.
It really does. So, what are the biggest arguments against it being a battery? You mentioned the lack of other electrical stuff.
That's number one. Where's the rest of the circuit? No wires, no lamps, no devices found that these batteries could have powered. It's a battery in a vacuum, technologically speaking.
A major problem. What else?
The asphalt seal. Great for keeping scrolls dry, terrible for a battery.
Why terrible?
Well, electrolytes get used up or evaporate. You need to replenish the liquid. Chipping away that hard asphalt seal every time would be really impractical, probably damaging the jar.
Good point. Not exactly user-friendly.
And then there's the specific design of the main Baghdad battery example. The copper cylinder doesn't even stick out past the asphalt plug.
Oh, right. How would you even connect a wire to it to get the electricity out?
Exactly. It makes drawing power seem very difficult, if not impossible, with that specific configuration.
Okay, that's a practical hurdle. What about the electroplating idea itself?
We still haven't found any definitively electroplated artifacts from that specific time and place that can be linked to these batteries. The common gold plating method back then was fire gilding, using mercury.
So the proposed application doesn't match the broader archaeological evidence for metalworking technique.
Pretty much. And then there's the dating issue we touched on. Parthian, Sasanian.
It doesn't matter, Rich.
It could. The level of technology might have varied between the two empires. But the bigger problem is the poor documentation from the original excavation. It makes pinning down a precise date really tough.
So lots of questions, few concrete answers. It's like a historical cold case.
It really is. And because it's so mysterious, it's captured the popular imagination, Esther.
Oh, definitely. You see the Baghdad Battery pop up everywhere. Documentaries on ancient mysteries, books about lost inventions.
Online forums debating ancient aliens.
Yeah, it gets lumped in with all sorts of alternative theories. The lack of a clear answer leaves room for, well, speculation.
Sometimes wild speculation. It becomes a sort of symbol for they knew more than we think.
Which is exciting, but maybe not always accurate. And tragically, the main artifact itself.
Yes, the original Baghdad Battery, the one König possibly found in the museum. It was looted from the National Museum of Iraq in 2003 during the chaos.
So it's gone. We don't know where it is.
Its current whereabouts are unknown, which is a massive blow to research. We can't do new tests on the original artifact.
That's terrible, like losing the key piece of evidence. Okay, let's dig into some lesser-known details, stuff that doesn't always make the headlines.
Sounds good, like König's original 1938 paper title. In German, it ends with a question mark. Ein galvanisches Element aus der Partherzeit.
A galvanic element from the Parthian period, so even he wasn't completely certain initially. He framed it as a question.
Exactly. It shows maybe more nuance than the later popular accounts suggest.
Interesting. What else?
Well, in 1948, an engineer at General Electric, Willard Gray, built a replica.
We mentioned replicas working, but what did he find?
He reported getting nearly 2 volts from his replica. That was a fairly early independent confirmation from a credible source that, yes, this design can produce electricity.
2 volts is pretty respectable for such simple materials.
Then there's that 1978 report by German scientist Arndt Egebrecht. He supposedly succeeded with electroplating using replicas.
Supposedly.
Yeah. The problem is, it seems it was reported, maybe in a conference or display, but not formally documented or published in detail. So it's hard to verify exactly what he did or achieved. Remains a bit anecdotal.
Tantalizing but unconfirmed. What about the liquid inside?
Chemical analysis of the corrosion products on the original jars did indicate the past presence of an acidic substance. consistent with something like wine or vinegar.
So that supports the electrolyte theory, at least that an acidic liquid was present.
It does, but again, doesn't prove it was used as an electrolyte.
Yeah.
And we keep coming back to the similarity.
To the other jars in the region, definitely used for scroll storage.
Yeah, that parallel evidence is strong. And the location, Kujut Rabu, being so close to major centers like Ctesiphon and Seleucia on the Tigris River, puts it right in a hub of activity where scrolls would certainly have been stored.
And those other similar jars found in Seleucia, they were found before König published his battery theory, right?
Yes, discovered in 1930. So the type of object was known, even if the battery interpretation hadn't been proposed yet.
And finally, that little lingering question mark over whether König himself dug them up or just found them in the museum archives.
Right. It adds another layer of uncertainty to the provenance story. Small details, but they add up to a picture that's far from clear-cut.
Absolutely. So if people listening want to dig even deeper themselves, where should they look?
There's quite a bit out there. Online, the Wikipedia page is usually a decent starting point for an overview.
Okay.
The podcast Engines of Our Ingenuity from the University of Houston did a good episode on it. And the website Ancient Origins has multiple articles exploring different facets. We can put links in the show notes.
Great. What about more academic sources?
Well, trying to find König's original 1938 paper, maybe through a university library search, would be interesting. The title again, Ein galvanisches Element aus der Bagdadzeit. Also, Paul Kaiser's 1993 article in the Journal of Near Eastern Studies, that's where he proposes the electrotherapy idea.
Worth looking up if you want the scholarly debate.
And for general context on the period and region, museum websites are fantastic. The National Museum of Iraq, though their online presence might be tricky. The British Museum, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, searched their collections for Parthian and Sasanian artifacts from Mesopotamia. You might see similar jars or related objects.
Good tip. And visually.
Search Baghdad Battery on streaming services or YouTube. There are definitely documentaries out there that cover the story, often focusing on the mystery angle.
Perfect. So lots of avenues for further exploration. Okay, let's try and wrap this historic road trip up. We've journeyed through this whole Baghdad Battery enigma.
And it leaves us in a really interesting place, doesn't it? This blend of what's scientifically possible versus what's archaeologically probable.
Yeah, we've seen how these simple-looking jars could theoretically generate electricity, and that possibility has fueled decades of really imaginative theories about ancient tech.
But when you weigh all the current evidence, especially the comparisons with other similar finds in the area, the needle tends to swing towards a more practical, everyday purpose.
Simple storage containers, likely for scrolls.
That seems to be the most logical conclusion based on what we know right now.
But it doesn't make the object itself any less intriguing. The fact that it just happens to look so much like a rudimentary battery is fascinating in itself.
Absolutely. The resemblance is uncanny.
So what's the takeaway for everyone listening? Maybe it's just a cool reminder that history is packed with surprises. Sometimes the most ordinary-seeming objects can spark the most extraordinary questions.
Well said. It challenges our assumptions.
And consider this. Even if the Baghdad Battery wasn't a battery, its accidental resemblance to one has definitely powered decades of debate, research, and let's be honest, some great stories.
It certainly has fueled our conversation today.
It makes you wonder what other seemingly simple things are around us, maybe even from our own time, that future historians might misinterpret or puzzle over. What secrets might they hold that could challenge future understanding?
That's a great thought to ponder, the potential for misinterpretation or for finding unexpected complexity in the mundane.
Exactly. Something to keep sparking in your mind long after our journey today. Thanks for joining us on the History Stories podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Don't forget to share, rate, and follow the show for more captivating stories from the world of flash culture.